Well, photo retouching has been around for well over 100 years. You can learn from it and apply hopefully a lot of it to what you do. All right, so I've got a basic plan of what I want to do in Photoshop and kind of overall. We definitely need to go and start in RAW. We need to get our Capture One RAW processing going and send this image and this set in a direction that I know is going to work really well for Photoshop. So let's take a look. So this is my hero shot. I decided this is the main one that I want to edit. I have two others just to show you real quick that I think work. Sometimes on simple collaborations when you haven't shot with someone in a long time and you say, hey, why don't we get together and create? You don't always think about, oh, a full magazine set, and you sometimes do something for 3 minutes. Oh, that was a pretty shot. Let's go to this angle. That's what this was. So I only have 3 shots, not worried about it. They're still beautiful. So let's start on what I want to do here. So I had a vision for the set and sort of loosely basing myself on some of the inspiration images that she sent. Now, the inspiration images she sent had a very deep skin tone, which while I definitely do that anyway in my work, she sent this poolside kind of deep skin tone, lots of texture. And of course, when I shot in diffuse light, because that's what I had by the pool right then, I didn't quite have the same vibe, and she's not the same model, but I thought, how can I reflect some of that? So let's explore that. A couple of basics that I'm going to do here in Capture One. The white balance is basically dead on. I don't see any reason to change the white balance. That's great. I love it when that comes out of camera that way. But as a reminder, I don't use white balance most of the time in some kind of manner to be really concerned about perfect medium gray or whatever neutral gray. That's fine. I'm not a gray card guy, but this is spot on. What I need to do is get those highlights under control. We have the beautiful stonework on the patio, and it's bright. It's not blown out because I intentionally shot it carefully, but it's a little bright. I want to deepen that a little bit. I have concerns about the color of the pool. I want to make it strong, but also make sure it doesn't turn purple, which I'll talk about in a second. But first and foremost, let's dive into the skin work. So what we need to do, go to our sort of color tab here, down to the color editor and skin tone. I would say most of the time I start on the skin tone tool in Capture One because skin is always my main concern. So I'm going to choose sort of a mid-tone, something like that. Now, because it generally you'll choose that pie piece on the color wheel here, somewhere between yellow and red. Well, Shelby has blonde hair. There's not a lot of hair in the shot, but a blonde model, I'll pull the yellow down just a little bit. Most of those really, really yellow areas don't really get affected too badly. So if you pull it down to an orange, at least you'll have a minimal, modification of the blonde hair. It can vary, so by no means am I saying it's a guarantee. Sometimes you still modify the hair a little bit. It usually doesn't bother me. But the reason why I choose skin tone with that tool is so I can use the uniformity sliders. Love these. So you can slide up hue, and when you do that, it's trying to take all the skin tones based on that range in the color wheel. It's trying to take all those skin tones and bring them more together. So they're more yellow, it brings them towards red, and vice versa. When it does that and it marries those ranges together, sometimes the entire shot will shift to red or yellow, and you can modify that with the sliders above it, the amount sliders. So you can take the hue left or right. There it is a little more yellow. There it is a little more red. I think somewhere in the middle works. Yeah, something like this. All right, so back to uniformity. Saturation uniformity sometimes is super useful and sometimes it makes things worse. So I play with it just to see what I'm getting. In this case, I think it's all right because some of my deeper orange shadows have been reduced, and that's a usual problem, isn't it? Deep shadows on skin tone will get super saturated. It's just the nature of how they're captured and the way the digital images work. So that actually helped. I actually enjoyed that. Now the lightness, generally speaking, it reduces contrast across the whole skin selection. Definitely want that here, but in small amounts, because I can add contrast later, but the shot is already low contrast because of how it was shot. Could be real mindful of that. However, now I have somewhat of an evenness around the skin tone so far. Remember, I'm always going to preach evenness on skin tone, but there's a couple of things to remember. I think it's a good time to say that right now. You don't want too even. That looks really fake. And you want to build it up. Don't try to get perfect evenness in Capture One. It's going to look fake immediately out of the box. And as soon as you go to Photoshop, you're not going to be able to fix that because you did it too fake. Let it build up, through the workflow that I'm showing you on this tutorial, because I think you get a more natural look, even if you want it to be extra perfect. Okay, but what I want to do now in the color editor is go over to the Advanced tab. I want to use the same eyedropper to choose roughly the same skin tone. I'm going to pull the pie piece out to the perimeters of the color wheel because that's going to make sure that it incorporates as much color saturation in that range as possible. All right, so what I want to do here is simply the lightness slider because under Advanced, I get more range of what I can control. So if I pull the lightness slider all the way down, I can do that. That doesn't look good, but some amount of it probably does because I can start deepening her skin tone just a little bit and maybe reduce the saturation just a bit. Keep in mind, in Capture One, when you have a saturation slider, it doesn't take much to make a radical change. -2, -3 is probably good enough saturation reduction. And too much, it starts turning gray. You don't want that. So maybe like a -30 on lightness feels pretty good. Here again, it's a buildup. So in RAW, I just want to get the idea started that I want the skin tone deeper. Now, when I did this, immediately I remembered the white patio. So I did some highlight recovery on it. Well, you know, I didn't do any highlight recovery on it. I guess I must have thought about it, but let's do it now. Because in doing that, not only am I going to get the detail back in the white patio and make it more even, but she has highlights on her. They're going to come down further, which further impacts that deepening of the skin tone that I want. So let's play with that a little bit. We don't want to overdo it, but reduce a bit. I'm going to hold down Option and click the little curly icon, a little squiggly arrow on high dynamic range. Yeah, see, that's not bad. See, you have to learn to trust yourself in raw processing when you're thinking about what's coming next in Photoshop. For example, if I hold down Option again and I turn off high dynamic range, the first thing I see is I really enjoy the brightness of that. I enjoy the patio having a little bit of a glow to it. When I do this, I feel like I've killed the dynamics, and I have. But I know what I'm doing in Photoshop later. By starting everything relatively even, I can make it look light and bright, or even high contrast bright if I want to in Photoshop. I just want to start with the most even possible. So it's a balance. You don't want to do too much. It's not about, you know, it's definitely a situation where less is more. But I am going to tone that just a little bit. I don't want to get completely flat. But see, there's a beautiful pattern in the stonework on the tile, and I don't want to lose that. I want to make sure I have it so I have the option in Photoshop to do things with it. Now, with her being darker than the background, for the most part, because the tile is so bright, this is another situation where I'm going to incorporate or look at what a vignette might do. It's a very sensitive subject for me because an overdone vignette like this starts to look really, really dated and kind of cheesy to me. I don't like it. If you can see the vignette, like you immediately can tell that there's a perimeter of something happening and it looks like an old vintage photo, then I'm of the opinion you did too much. However, psychologically, if you do a little bit, let me show you what I've done with a -0.65 off and on. You don't even realize it's there, but because she's in the middle and darker, by darkening the perimeter, it does bring a little more attention to her. When you do that, you probably want to mess with other things like levels or exposure or something like that. So let's do that. Let's find that. I think on levels, I will brighten a little. You'll see me do that a lot when I work in RAW. I'll definitely feel, you might observe it and be like, aren't you it's so counterintuitive. You're doing the opposite of something else. You just reduce the brightness of the highlights with, you know, highlight reduction and control like that with high dynamic range. And now you're bringing the levels down to make it brighter too? What does that mean? Well, it's just the way they work differently. I bring back the highlight recovery so I can get the texture in there. And when I add a little more with levels, they work together to kind of make it brighter, but still controlling some of the highlight data, if that makes sense. So it's not that I'm undoing necessarily everything. Okay, so something like that is looking pretty good. Now, this is something I think I want to do. I'm going to go over here to the lens correction section. I do this sometimes on some shots if I just want to change the overall geometry of things, but not in a way that's going to look fake. I mean, you can do Liquify all day long in Photoshop and make changes like this, but overall, because of the way Capture One processes RAW, if I'm going to stretch or distort an image, I want to do it in RAW because it's going to be so smooth and seamless, it doesn't look that way. So for example, on the aspect over here, if you slide aspect back and forth, this is something that's normally relegated for architectural and things like that. But in small amounts, like an aspect of 2, let me turn that off real quick so you can see that and that. It stretches her horizontally. Now, if you look at it before and after, you might feel like something is wrong, like, oh, now she looks stretched, maybe. But I promise you, if you didn't see the shot originally, you won't notice, but it creates a more of a wider, more dramatic effect for this horizontal shot where she's stretched out. It adds to that dynamic. So sometimes I do that, and sometimes I do it vertically as well, right? So the Keystone tool, perhaps not something everyone uses in portrait work, but I do enjoy it from time to time. I don't want to stretch in Photoshop if I can avoid it, because I love the way the Capture One, processing algorithms, I guess, stretch things without making it look stretched. It would look like you shot it that way. So I love that. Okay, I think we're on to something here. This is a pretty solid go. Things like the blue cast on her leg, which I mentioned on the retouching plan, that's a Photoshop thing. We need to mask that in directly. I can already see that the skin tone tool has attempted to bring some of that, but as soon as that range goes into blue, it falls off. That's okay. It's a really hard line right now of that blue highlight hitting her leg. I'm not worried about it. However, the pool, let's address that. Let's go back to the color. We're gonna go back to the Color Editor Advanced tab. Use a little eyedropper and choose the pool. Now, what's great about this is that when you have an open blue pool like this, Capture One is amazing, especially when there's not other blue tones to worry about. So you can boost the saturation significantly without going too much. You don't wanna lose the data under the water. And then you can deepen it as well. And per my usual, I'll slide the blue towards teal, because I'll probably put a warm wash of color on this in my color work in Photoshop, and blue pools tend to go purple. If I make them teal, they go back to blue. Just a little quick workaround to make my life a little bit easier. So something like that, a little bit of a teal saturation boost. Yes, definitely like that. I'm really feeling that. So real quick, let's highlight all the other edits in the same set. It's only 3, and that's okay. So now we can apply everything. Because we haven't made any exposure adjustments independently of the shots, we can immediately do a full blanket copy. So Shift Command C, because that one's selected, and then Shift Command V immediately to apply it to the rest of them. All right, now that we have all the colors and minor adjustments ready to go, we do realize there's some exposure changes. Real easy to fix. So come over here to the exposure section, and we're gonna go put our cursor on that field on exposure. Then, depending on which one we tap on, like this one, we can use the arrow keys to go up and down to make them match. I'm actually gonna take this one back down because I'm still after that depth. Obviously, I must have just changed a setting while I was shooting because I was probably concerned about blowing out highlights maybe in the patio. That's all right. So a few shots after the first hero shot are a little bit darker, and that's all right. We compensate for that visually, going to the different images and using the arrow keys up and down. See, now that's phenomenal. To me, that is all the color work I think I need. It's very simple. There really are only 3 tones: skin tone, neutral, white and black, and then blue. And that's all we're really concerned about in these sets. So these are ready to go, and I'm gonna export these to go to Photoshop and begin the actual retouch. All right, so now we're in Photoshop. We've exported from Capture One, and now we're gonna begin the retouching workflow that I wanna do for this diffuse light shot, but I still wanna keep a good contrast. Now I wanna make sure that the skin, as great as it is on Shelby to begin with, I still wanna create a really strong sort of commercial glamour look on it. So the skin work is gonna be dominant once again on this edit, but there's some other elements that I have to work on. And because we always start with healing, which is my go-to, my #1 thing, there's other elements to heal here other than skin. But let's dive into the skin work and also clean up the environment and try to make this look as polished as possible. So right out of the gate, we're gonna copy the background layer, which is just a careful way to make sure that if you really mess something up, you can revert back to it. All right, so sometimes I dive right into other things other than the skin. I'm so curious about what it's gonna look like if I clean up this background. I'm gonna use my spot healing brush and quickly make some changes to the little bits floating in the pool. Now, a lot of times when you shoot in the pool, wherever you are, it'll be clean because they expect a photo shoot and all that. This was very improvised, and also just before summer was really kicking in. So the pool had a little bit of stuff in it, and that's okay. These may not be that simple. Let's see how cooperative we are. We're going to see, because you don't have to be a big composite Photoshop artist to know how to do this stuff, because every now and then it's going to make a difference in your shot, not just skin work, not just how you modify something with the actual subject, the model herself, but cleaning up. It'll surprise you how beautiful a shot can look if you just clean it up a little bit. let's see if Photoshop makes some great decisions on these leaves. So far it's not doing too good because of this line here, but we're gonna try to sample from here over here and see if we can clean up some of that. Yep, and I bet the regular healing, spot healing rather, will probably do a good job there. Yep, that's good enough. Now this big one here, let's get the regular healing brush and bring over, oh, let's try this tile right here. Something like this. I think it's really, really important to have this one as clean as possible. I think that's gonna make a big difference. So that's a little bit sloppy, but I bet we can fix some of that. And if it doesn't work, you know, we scrap it and do it again. It's not the end of the world. That's a little wave of water there. That looks fine. Just gonna get through this as quick as possible. I'd rather show you guys a complete edit the way I want rather than say, oh, well, I could clean up the patio, blah, blah, blah. Nope, I'm gonna show you real quick. Let's do a bit, it's all in camera blur, but that object bugs me. Let's try it again, see if Photoshop makes a better choice. It's making bad choices. One more, and then we'll try a different method. Nope, we're gonna try a different method. You have to remember, the AI that Photoshop is using is essentially trying to guess. So if you try sometimes a second time, it'll actually like, maybe it'll go, oh, okay, you gave me a slightly different selection, so I think I get what you mean. So just try it again. It's in camera blur. Overall, yeah, it looks like the rest of the line, the rest of that perimeter back there. It'll be fine. A couple more things, and we will go right onto the skin. But see, I want to show you this because this is not insignificant. As simple as these small edits are, if we turn off what we've done from that to that, you see now all the focus is on her. We don't have to worry about little things floating around. Sometimes clutter and scatter can look great. It's part of your shot, is what you want. But in this case, those are not helping the shot. Simple little cleanup and they're done. That makes me feel better because as I go throughout my edit, I have a better understanding of what I want the shot to look like. So, all right. Now, let's dive into regular spot healing and let's clean up some moles and other little small things. That is what spot healing is for. And since I'm down here in the leg area, I'll mention again that blue cast across her leg is really quite profound. And it's very common when you shoot swimwear in a pool. And sometimes on the beach, but really more in a pool. I address it in different ways. I believe in reducing, not removing. And when we get there, it's kind of going to be a unique process. We will address that. For now, let's get this healing done. I say that because healing, there's only just so much we can do with it. I'm going to attempt to kind of look at some of these stretch marks with healing and see if it's okay because it's a little bit blurry back there. Just ever so slightly soft. Okay, that's not bad. We have some dark areas here. We have bruise there. This is all dodge and burn considerations. But see if I can clean up some of these harder lines, these high contrast points. All right, yeah, but I'm going to address the rest of that with dodge and burn, I think. Yeah, that's going to make me feel a little better if I do that with dodge and burn. Couple little basics here. I mentioned earlier in a previous video on getting ready for this is the veins in the forearm because, you know, laying on a patio on your back in the Texas heat, it makes veins pop out. And I know I want to reduce that, but that's also a dodge and burn situation to, you know, at least bring that down but without getting rid of any of that skin texture. That's not something I'm going to try to heal because I'll replace those veins with blurry spots. You know, I say that all the time because, you know, you have a problem you want to get rid of, so you trade it out for another problem. No, we don't want that. We want to just reduce that. So we'll address the hands with dodge and burn. Couple basics. There's some discoloration right in here on the armpit. We're not in color, so we're not going to worry about that now. We'll get the color correction specifically on that later. We probably could have addressed that in RAW as well, but I think I have a little more control here and I have a plan in my head of all the things I want to do. So I'm just going to incorporate the armpit into what I want to do. Couple basic little heels here and there. A couple of flyaways. All the rest of the hair doesn't bother me. I think I'm good on that. Yeah. Cool. Anything else I see? Belly button looks okay. I might reshape that with dodge and burn. Down to the foot. The water droplets look good. Yeah, this is going to work for a cleanup of healing. So the skin work was pretty straightforward on healing, but on the healing process here, I want to reiterate, it's very important to sometimes clean up your scene. The reason why I felt like this one really needs to be cleaned up, some people just clean up everything, but in this shot especially, with all this beautiful geometry that was so clean, and the way the water is so geometric and clean, it's not bubbling, it's not, I think the overall, look of the shot benefits from having unobstructed background. You don't want a leaf. It doesn't look natural. It looks like a mistake. It looks like someone didn't clean. So to me, it really speaks to the shot that I cleaned it up a little bit extra. Luckily, it wasn't that hard. So that is healing done. So let's continue. All right, so with the healing done, we have the environment clean, we have this, basic blemishes removed off the skin. Now we go into what I love to do to make a shot really come to life, and that's dodge and burn for skin work. So let's get right to it. Very simply, we do have an action that I created. There's so many type of actions to do this, but it's included in this tutorial, so make sure you install those. But it's NBP dodge and burn main. Tap that, hit continue, and everything is set up. Let's explain it real quick to be clear. We have two curved layers, one for dodging, brightening, and that's just a simple curve popping upward, which is creating a brightening effect, but on that curve, thus preserving contrast, and that's what we want because that preserves texture. And burn, darkening, of course, has the opposite type of curve. And then as a visualization layer, something that I use temporarily while I'm working, we have all the saturation removed, so I can only look at black and white. Helps me, pay attention to value, darks and lights, but also make sure I don't get distracted by any color shifting that may happen while I do it. We can fix color later. So that is a temporary layer, just to make it clear again, and it will go away. So let's start dodging. We want to make sure we have a white paintbrush, nice soft edge on it. Okay, and we want 100% opacity and a 1%, maybe a 2% flow at times. So let's just pick a place to start, zoom in, and let's start addressing this. As I always say, whenever I show dodge and burn, it can feel a little confusing. Like, what do I do? Where do I start? It's a little difficult sometimes to explain, but some of the ways that I felt sort of might help is look for spots that are inside areas they don't belong, if that makes sense. Like a dark spot in a light area. You want to make sure that it looks like it goes away, because if you have a dark spot in a light area, when you lighten it, it looks like it's gone. It blends in with its immediate environment, immediate range, right? Think of that as like a crease or a divot or another blemish or something like that. If you lighten an area, if you lighten a dark area that's inside another light area, a bigger light area, it should go away. It's just an illusion. So I'm going to show you as I go along here, as I do with all the others, to make sure that this is, something that you have to practice. I want to make that very clear. You really just need to keep on it and take a look and maybe edit a shot, delete all the dodge and burn, edit it again, the same one, so you can see what maybe went wrong and how to make it look better. Sometimes you need to zoom in like I'm about to do here, and sometimes you need to zoom out to make sure that the reshaping that you're doing with the dodging and burning isn't, making something look weird. And it's very, very easy to do when you're very, very zoomed in and you can't see the forest for the trees. So that's pretty straightforward to address there. Now let's look at it overall. Yeah, that's a nice smooth curve. Now, if you look carefully here, because the blue cast is creating such an issue, there's a big mess here, but I can still dodge and burn in there, even if the colors would throw me off because of the desaturation layer, okay? Very, very important to have that, because in a case where there's huge blue cast on her leg, I might not be able to dodge and burn successfully or easily if I'm worried about what the colors are doing. I can't tell what's dark or light. So by doing this, it lets me focus just on luminosity, even in this weird blue cast. I feel like her leg is a huge element in the shot. If you really look at it, that thigh going down into the water, that is like almost a focal point of the shot, really. So I want to make sure that thigh is clear and clean, so you have no obstructed perception of anything going on. So that's very, very important for the dodge and burn step. And to repeat and to reiterate, just like I tell all my students, the upshot of doing this entire process with dodge and burn is that while you're fixing blemishes, for lack of a better term, or scars or things like that, you're not messing with the finite skin texture. And that's what we want to keep, because then when we run a sharpen on it, all that texture will pop, right? We want that. If we're replacing a problem area with a really, shoddily done healing process, or copying and pasting another chunk of skin, not only will it not look right in general, but when you go to add contrast, add color, add sharpening, those problem areas really start to like raise their hands. Hey, I'm here. Remember that bad edit you did? Yeah. So you want to make sure that you make it as smooth and clean as possible now, and dodge and burn is the way to do it. Yeah. Probably need a little burning here, just to kind of smooth everything out. I'm going to zoom out a bit because I do want to see the overall shape. That might sound a little bit, counterintuitive to say that we're reshaping, but that's kind of what we're doing. We're not using Liquify. We're not moving pixels. But by changing the perception of highlights and shadows, that's kind of what we're doing. We're reshaping. And you have to remember that. You can reshape almost the shape of a nose, especially on a straight-on shot. You can just dodge and burn, and next thing you know, the nose has a slightly different shape. Because those highlights and shadows is what gives the perception of dimension. And if you change those around, your brain processes it differently. Oh, there's no longer a hole there. There's no longer a bump there because you changed the way the light's hitting it. And that's the whole premise of all of this. Yeah. Now here, there's some, water pouring down her leg. There's a very different sense of specular highlights because of the wet spots. I don't want to undo that. I want to leave that. But I want to blend a few things. I don't want to attack that. Oh, it's dark and light, so I got it. No, that's water. That's shiny. Leave it alone. We want that. Also, when you dodge and burn, as a side note, when you dodge and burn a model by a pool or in the beach, if she's covered in water droplets, you can dodge and burn her skin without affecting the water droplets. It's phenomenal. So you just keep working, and the water droplets don't get affected because they have a very strong contrast to them. So your dodging and burning will preserve that. In this case, she only has a little bit of water on her shin, and that's all right. But we definitely don't want to pretend that we're going to attack it. We just leave it. Something like that. In fact, we can probably get away with just leaving a lot of that alone down there. Yep. I like the shape of this hip bone right here, and this tendon going into the muscle looks good there. Now this other leg, let's address that. I shot it at 135. I think it was like f4, I can't remember, something like that. And at 135, it can get shallow quick. So her left leg is actually a little bit softer than her right leg just because of the depth of field. But that gives us a little more freedom, essentially, without trying to make an excuse. It gives us a little more freedom because we don't have to be razor accurate with some of our editing because it's just ever so slightly soft. It doesn't take from the shot, but it's just ever so slightly soft. Got rid of that bruise with a little bit of dodging. Change that brush size. I say that over and over. You want to keep that brush size adjusted, however you prefer it. Key commands on your tablet, maybe that's what you want to use, whatever you prefer. Make sure you're adjusting that on the fly depending on the area you're working in. It's going to make your life a lot easier. And it's going to take some practice to figure out exactly how, but the general rule of thumb is try to make the brush size sort of match the area you're about to work on. You don't want a teeny tiny thin brush like that. All you do is make lines. We don't want that. And if it's too big, you're affecting everything, including the dark area and the surrounding areas. So you want to keep it roughly the size you're working in. Don't spend a lot of time trying to measure it or, wasting time staring, going, does that fit? Does that fit? Nah, improvise. You can always undo. You can always paint with black if you need to, fix an issue. But just think about that brush size as you go. I'm going to zoom out just a bit because I'm really concerned about the overall shape. There's a lot of rippling going on here under the skin. Happens with limbs being bent, happens with the way the light is hitting, all kinds of reasons why this might happen. But with that right leg being this perfectly smooth, stretched out situation, I don't want the left leg to completely not match. It's not going to completely be perfect, but if I can help it not stick out like, oh, what happened over there, then that's what I want to do. Now again, we don't have to be razor accurate, and we can do a wash of frequency separation on top of this whole leg if we needed to, because we want to make sure that it's soft. Well, not soft, but matches the smoothness and the dynamics of the right leg. But with the due diligence we do on dodge and burn, it makes everything happy. Everything that comes after this is going to be so much better. Believe me, I've done plenty of edits in my day where I kind of half-assed the dodge and burn, and I regret it. And sometimes I just scrap everything I've done after it and go, no, we need to do this right. Don't want to do that. Okay, so we have a little bit of a dark spot here from the, just the way the leg is bent and the way the skin's bunching up. But there's also some light spots in the middle. We want to brighten those because then we're going against our whole point. So we got to go a little bit more careful. All right. Sometimes just moving your own head perception, you'll be like way back here looking at the screen. Sometimes you get closer. That helps you look at, the shape dynamics. Sometimes just as much as zooming in and out can do it. Just got to get the look. There we go. Now, sometimes if you're looking at the overall shape, like for example on this thigh, you're looking at the overall shape and you're trying to figure out how the, you know, the darks and the lights are working to create a shape. Is it working for you? Is it good? Is it not? Is it smooth enough? Someone told me this and I thought, oh, I don't realize I do this, but I do. Sometimes when you're looking at this, you can kind of blur your eyes. Like right now I'm blurred. And that helps me see everything more overall instead of finite details. And it takes your brain into a different space. It doesn't look at a leg anymore. It just looks at shapes and value. And if you can do that and also refocus your eyes, or maybe just take off your glasses, sometimes you can see where the shape problems are with that. And I don't wear glasses, so I have to blur my eyes. But someone mentioned that and I thought, blur my eye? Oh yeah, I do that. And it just helps me get an overall idea of what these very subtle darks and light areas are doing to the overall shape of whatever I'm working on. So maybe that'll help you in dodging and burning. I'm not sure. It's sort of like looking at a shot overall versus micro details. The way you look at a shot on a phone, which is small, or across the hallway in a gallery or something. You know, sometimes seeing it that way is such a different perception than being right up on it. And I don't mean that in an optical illusion way. I'm not saying like a Monet or something where it just looks completely different from far away and close up. No, no, no. It's just the general perception of the artwork. Okay, it's getting there. I'm using a broader brush now because I'm trying to reshape a few of these bigger areas. I'm getting there. Okay, let's take a look what I've done out of curiosity. There's the off and there's the on. Already getting so much better. And it seems like every time you do an edit, there's always one area that might take most of your attention just because of the way the light fell, like I said, or the way the skin creased or something, you know. And if you take the time to make sure that that doesn't stick out, you're going to be a lot happier. Apart from, you know, your colleagues saying her left leg doesn't look as edited as the rest. Apart from that, non-photographers, they won't know what's wrong, but they'll be like, I don't know, it's nice, I guess, but they don't realize that something's up and that the legs won't match at all. Or they might be like, is that a Photoshop mistake? Nothing like non-photographers saying, is that a Photoshop? Did you Photoshop that wrong, right? We don't want that. So we want to remove any type of visual bias. We just want someone to enjoy the shot and either go, wow, or that's pretty. We want that. We don't want, that looks weird. No, we don't want that. All right. That is looking pretty okay. Here again, like other edits that have little stretch marks in them, they're so bright. They're so, you know, these are actually a little bit darker. We might try them, but for the most part, stretch marks are going to have like a shininess to them. They're going to catch a lot of light. They're going to get really bright. You can't really dodge and burn them too well if they're really bright because there's no data in there except white. You can't bring that down with a curve, really. But that's where frequency separation will smooth it over. On occasion, you can heal them out. But, you know, stretch marks, if they're really bothering you and you want to try to get rid of them, have a go with dodge and burn, but understand it's going to be touchy. They don't always work as well. These aren't super bright because of the nature of the lighting, so we're going to try to darken them very detailed and see if we can remove the fact that, you know, that they're kind of dominating that inner thigh look right there. And even if not perfect on dodge and burn, pass over a frequency separation, preserving the texture but changing the color will probably do the job we want there. Yeah, that's going to look a lot better there. I think I like that. So now that I zoomed out, I see some shaping issues. We want to make that as smooth as possible. The precedent that the right leg has set, if you will, by being so stretched out and perfect, I want to make sure the left leg at least comes close. So, unlike, you know, I mean, if you photograph sort of general portraiture and, you know, just call it what it is, not a lot of skin in your shots, maybe you have hands and feet, and necks, you know, that's a certain way to approach it. But when you shoot a lot of skin or figure work or bikini, lingerie, skin work is everything. You have to make it look right. And right is relative. You can do less, you can do more. You can have a more natural look. You can have a more commercial, ultra polished look, and it could vary shoot to shoot for you. It depends on what you want to do. But knowing how to address the skin look issues that you want, not just fixing, but stylizing the way you want, very, very important. So do not shy away from the dodge and burn. For now, I think that might be what I want to do on that leg. Yeah, I think that feels pretty good. Yep, from that to that, it's certainly a lot better. Not much to do on the abdomen, but let's address a few spots. Actually, I'm going to burn right here. I don't want this area to look quite as bright as it is. I want to blend a little bit more. There and there, perfect. Feeling that little spot there. Just look at the belly button. Yeah, just gonna do a little bit of dodging and burning here. Just there's some strange shapes going on. I'd rather just look like a little, like a little hole in her belly rather than some of the other elements that are happening here. So we're just gonna smooth that out a bit. Something like that. That sort of works. I want to leave some of these little, the little dark spots are actually defining her, her tone, her body tone, her muscle tone. And we want to make sure that we don't remove those or, all the work she's done on her abdomen with her fitness, you just undid it. So we don't want that. The ribs that are in there, you can barely see them, but I can dodge and burn them away, but I don't want to. She's stretched out and the ribs are part of the anatomy. It looks great. Okay, now that I start in the very beginnings of this armpit area, then I definitely want to look at the situation and see what I'm going to do. So if you turn off the desaturation layer, we recall that there's a lot of discoloration in there. That's fine, but that is why we turn on the desaturation layer. So we can get our values set to make sure we solve the problem, at least with darks and lights first, with luminosity, and then we can address color later. So I'm just going to lighten a few areas up here. I don't want to remove all of this, but I want to make it look a little more seamless if I can. Yeah. I'm going to address some burning now. Just darken this a bit. Absolutely, there's going to be worse discoloration now because there already was, and now we're brightening and darkening, so that's okay though. That's something we'll solve. But unfortunately, that's right there. It's right where her arm is bent down. It's right on the perimeter of her outfit and her chest. That's going to be noticed. So have to address this in some degree. And as I remind you in all these edits, it's a build-up process. If you don't solve the problem that you're trying to fix with one step, that's okay. And as time goes on, you're going to think to yourself, I can do a certain amount of the solution with this step, and I know I can finish it with the next step. Right? You'll get to that point where you recognize what you can do and what you can't do with certain processes and how to evolve that look and again, do that build up. So for example, I know for a fact that matching all these luminosities with dodge and burn is hardly the master fix. When we turn that off and take a look at that, it would be very clear what we need to do next, but it's not here. It's not in dodge and burn. Okay. That looks pretty good. Turn those off and on. Yeah, that helps. Just kind of distract, or not distract, I should say. And speaking of, let's a couple little small areas in the elbow, but let's address the hand. I guarantee you we're not going to be able to completely fix this, but we mentioned earlier that if you want to get rid of these veins, these are pretty strong. But with dodge and burn, we should be able to remove the illusion of the veins without touching any of the texture. Let's find out. Let's have a go at it. So we're going to brighten the darker areas and, darken the lighter areas. That's the whole idea. You may have to build it up back and forth with a hand, which is something that's generally noticed, especially on the forefront of a shot. I don't like to do, sloppy edits if I can avoid it, because people will notice that. And I don't just mean your colleagues. I don't mean your photographer friends or your retouching friends. I mean, people who might hire you, and your clients in general who aren't interested in how you did something. They just want to know how it looks. And if they see something wrong, you might want to reconsider what you're doing. I think here in 2020, in modern world, people can recognize that something's been, quote, photoshopped, but they may not know, of course, the details how it was done. But if they feel like it's been photoshopped, it's been edited, but it looks great, you've won. That's really what it amounts to. You don't want to be the next Photoshop disaster, right? All right, so something like that. I'm going to show you the beginnings of this, or rather the results of this one, and then we'll continue the rest. You can probably already see, but the entire idea is that to that. We have all that unobstructed skin texture, but we removed the vein. And sometimes just reducing the vein is actually useful. When removing it feels like it might look a little fake, or you're not getting the result you like. Sometimes just a small reduction helps. I take the time to do this on hands, especially because there's going to be a lot of texture on forearms and hands. I don't want to replace that texture with a really bad heel. be surprised. Photoshop can surprise you sometimes. So if you want to try it with a heel, you can, but definitely consider rather dodging and burning it so you can make it look a little bit smoother. Yeah, see, that's reduced. Now again, I'm zoomed in, so what do we get when we zoom out? That's what matters, because we're viewing this image as a whole, right? So let's zoom out. Okay, it's better. It's definitely better. Went from this to that, and it's pretty smooth. We can also probably finish that, if you want to get it really smooth, finish that with frequency separation. However, by doing this step first, it makes us use less frequency separation, if you will, because we don't have to worry about trying to get rid of all that contrast. We've reduced it already. So let's address the hand. There's a lot here, but I think this is going to be important to the shot. Let's see what we can do to reduce. This is going to be tricky because there's so many darks and lights and bumps, and this, it's like, where do we start? What do I address? Well, sometimes you just have to pick a spot, dive in, and then go back and forth between dodging and burning as you reduce this contrast in a smart way, with the upshot being that you're not getting rid of skin texture. This is one of those situations where if you don't want to do dodge and burn, you're in trouble. You're not going to fix this hand. And this is not just me talking from my experience in my own editing. This is from students who've hit me up saying, hey, what do I do with this? And you dodge and burn the hand. I don't want to dodge and burn. Then you leave it alone. This is the only real way to do this with a great result. Because if you wash this over with some color on frequency separation and reduce the contrast a bit, it won't work that well, or it'll just be the reduction of the contrast will be so minimal. Why did you do it? We really want to make this illusion work. The illusion being that we've removed the veins and the tendons and all that without touching the skin texture. We're going to come close. Okay, a lot of dark areas. That's usually what I hit mostly, but we're definitely going to need to burn in several spots, actually. Yep, absolutely. I'm not going to do it this time, but sometimes when you're doing these heavy areas, you might want to shift from a 1% flow to a 2% flow if you want to get things done quicker. I'm going to build it up nice and slow regardless, but if you feel comfortable and you're really getting your dodge and burn in a good vibe and you feel really good with it, sometimes you want to switch to that 2% just to ensure that you can do things a little bit quicker, but it requires a little more of a refined touch, because you can definitely start undoing a lot of your work, or messing things up instead of helping it because the flow is too fast for you. And if you haven't tried the difference between 1% and 2%, experiment with it. It's something you have to feel. I can't really show you. You'll see how 2% feels so much faster than 1%. And never mind 4 or 5 or anything like that. That does not work in dodge and burn. Not in my world. For other things, other processes with masks, yes, but for dodge and burn, you definitely want to use 1 or 2%. Okay, it's building. It's building. It's got to happen with time. Let's take a look though. See what we've done so far. From that to that. It's getting there. This is definitely a case of reduction and not removal. There's a lot happening in here that's definitely part of the anatomy, but I do want to remove some of the contrast and texture because it doesn't really match the rest of her. So this is one of those situations where, yep, it's worth the time. Something like that. Okay, excellent. Brighten in there. There we go. Now that I've smoothed it a little bit, I can use a bigger brush. That's working pretty well. Good. How about the fingers? Let's address those a little bit. And again, the effort here really is just reducing the contrast in a smart way, so allowing me to do frequency separation to give it a final polish. And I do that smartly as well, because I don't want to use frequency separation and just make it look faker. We don't want that. Definitely going to get some discoloration in there, which is why frequency separation will help when that time comes. And you notice I'm talking about the next step and sometimes the previous steps while working on one, because it's a build-up. Like I said, you got to consider what's coming next always. Okay, some stronger areas here at the wrist. Let's address those. We're in shadow here, so I'm going to burn some of these highlights down and then brighten some of this. Excellent. All right, let's turn that off and on. Cool. Look at it all. Okay, it's better. And with the frequency separation on that, that'll definitely help. And sometimes when you have these big areas on the back of the hand with tendons or veins, you dodge and burn it to reduce the contrast. You frequency separate on top to smooth it out further. Sometimes what remains are these long, thin, high contrast lines. And it might be an opportunity to heal because now Photoshop has less to think about. Oh, I can get rid of a thin line. That's not a problem, as opposed to a whole tendon, right? So you might even heal later. But that's a minor reconstruction that we're doing on the hand. That's not something you do sort of normally in my workflow. But I wanted to address it because it's a thing. And I think for that, it's probably going to be good enough with frequency separation later. All right, now finally, as I like to do, the neck and face. There might be some areas on the shoulders that I'll see most likely. And we'll dive right into that. Back to the dodging. Okay, as a reminder, a nice soft brush. Most of the time you want a soft brush. You don't want to be dodging and burning with a hard edge brush. You're going to be fighting against yourself. So keep it really soft and change that size as you're working. Won't need a whole lot here. Just a few spots to reshape. Nice broad brightening there. I'm probably only going to use dodge on this. Yeah, I don't see any places I want to burn. The cheek highlight, I like it. Don't worry if it's shiny on this shot. I like that energy that it brings. It's very outdoorsy. It's very swimwear. I like the shiny cheek very much. So I might, sort of reduce it maybe, but I'm not going to try to worry about it like, oh, it looks bad because it's shiny. No, I think it looks great because it's shiny. It adds a lot of dimension. Okay. You want to leave the cheekbone dark because that's part of anatomy. It's part of the shape. Yeah, there's some makeup in there to help do that, to help enhance the cheekbone, but it's really there. So let's not get rid of that dark spot. Just going to make your face look sort of flat. I like the dynamic from the cheekbone. Looks really good. Because as a reminder, I'll say it again, with dodge and burn, you are reshaping. You're just reshaping in a perceptual way, not literally moving pixels. That's how you have to consider it. Let me zoom out just a bit so I can see what her chin is doing. Look at it normal. Yep, got to reshape a few things. Yeah, okay. I think this is probably enough for now. Let me just turn that off out of curiosity. Yep, we help smooth out that chin line a little bit. Maybe a little more on the nose, actually. Some dark areas here that just need to be smoothed out a bit. Brighten that highlight on the nose a bit, right there and there. Maybe some areas in the shoulder here. Nope, not there. Yeah, something like that works. I think that. Let's look at the whole image before we turn off the black and white, or the desaturation layer. Initially, as my eye moves around, I don't see anything significantly wrong. So let's peer at it with the color. Absolutely, yep. Good. I'm actually really, really pleased with that because my main concerns being the left leg and the right leg matching. Currently, I really feel like they do, despite it one being softer. All right, excellent. So that was some good dodging and burning. Tedious, but I want to remind you, if you look at it like an integral part of getting the look that you want, not just a step that someone's burdening you and making you do, it's part of the art process. It's not just, oh, I've got to do this to clean it. No, it's part of developing that look. Get dodge and burn under your belt. Practice, practice, practice. It is always worth it. Let's continue. With good dodge and burn already done, now it's time for frequency separation. It's not something I do every single time, but when I know it's part of the look I want to get, it's absolutely ideal. And in this case, I have a little something extra on her leg, which I've mentioned in other videos. Let's talk about that straight away after we set up frequency separation. So to set it up, we have the dodge and burn layers before. The desaturation layer, I have it turned off. I'm gonna go ahead and delete it. But we need to create a new raster layer or a new merged layer. So we just click on the very, very top layer on the palette and we hold down Shift, Option, Command E, and that's gonna flatten it, bring it to the top because that's how we set up frequency separation. So what we're gonna do, go to Window, Extensions, and open up my NBP FreakSep Control 2. It's a plugin that's included in your tutorial. If you don't have it installed, then you won't see it under here, under Window Extensions. So quit Photoshop, install it, and come back. All right, so what I want to do, I want to keep a relatively coarse texture. And my usual lately is the median filter algorithm. I love how it works. We have information about all of this, but for now, just know that's what I'm going to go for. And I'm going to use this preset of 8 on the radius. That's going to give me a little bit of a broader it's going to preserve more of the general texture, the bigger, broader texture. So no matter how much I paint, it's still going to be pretty good. I don't need to worry about previewing any further. I'm just going to hit apply and let it do its thing, setting up the texture layer and the color layer underneath, and then I'm going to work in between. So my setup is ready, but let's talk about some stuff. Frequency separation all over here and there to, smooth out some areas and fix some discoloration. That's all normal, but we do have quite an area here with this leg. Now, frequency separation in and of itself is not going to solve it. It might be able to, but it's going to be a lot harder to make sure that the shading and everything works the way we want. However, this is a perimeter line here. If you look careful, right in here, it's almost a very strong line. It's not just from the natural reflection of the pool, but it's also some of the raw work that we did in Capture One to balance the skin tones. It hit this hard line and didn't know what to do with it. I saw it happen, but I also knew I could fix it. While we are going to address that directly when we do some significant color correction on it, with frequency separation, I want to try to blend in the transition between the good skin tone and that weird blue cast from the pool. So that's the first thing I want to address. Let's get a paintbrush out, white paintbrush with approximately 4, maybe 5% flow. And let's do that. I'm going to think about right here, right about mid-thigh where this perimeter is. I'm going to choose this color and I'm going to start blending. And then maybe this color and blend, constantly resampling because I want to be able to blend the color that's around it. So to reiterate, we don't take a light color and bring it into here. And we don't take a dark color and bring it into there. It doesn't help. Got to keep that the color selection with the swatch tool, holding down Option while you have your paintbrush out, constantly resampling color. I'm not going to worry about all the way down to the perimeter of the edge of the leg. I just want to blend in. Let me show you what I'm doing. I just want to blend that transition a little bit. That's going to help me later because there's definitely a luminosity change there as well as a color change. This is going to help a little bit. Now, as significant as the problem was, dodge and burn was not going to solve it. I knew that going in. It's mostly a significant color replacement that we're going to do. But this should help us with a better result just by smoothing in that transition as carefully as we can. We're going to address the rest of the leg as a whole. But for now, I just want to get that transition line a little smoother if I can. Now, in this particular shot, and others like it because of the blue casting, which is, again, something I deal with when I shoot swimwear, I don't like that blue cast. You might want to leave it if that's more natural for you, and sometimes it actually helps the shot. It could look cool maybe if she's wet, real shiny skin with some oil or something, and you like the blue reflections, cool. But sometimes when I do this particular look, I don't want that blue cast, so I'm constantly editing it out. I do it all the time. Sometimes they're 3/4 in the water up to their stomach, so their entire abdomen is blue, and I don't know, I don't like it, so I tend to fix it, and this is one of the steps to make sure that that transition line, because of the way it ended up on this leg, I know I wanted to smooth it out. Okay, so we went from this to that. That's better. It's a little bit strong, but that's what opacity is for. So maybe like a 70% opacity, that'll help. Excellent. That by itself is not the fix, obviously, and it may not even be the final thing we do on that perimeter line. But I know for a fact that that's going to help me when I do that full color replacement. But for now, let's continue. We're going to make another layer, and we're going to just address some other areas. I think that knee needs to be smoothed out just a bit. Just the transitions in there. It's dark. Very common for knees to go dark. Lighten them a little bit. Yeah, you can lighten them with curves or something else, or dodge and burn. But a little bit of frequency separation painting also just kind of blends things a little bit nicer. Don't worry about hitting the edge. You know, if you paint skin tone out here by the pool, we can mask that out. So keep your brush strokes as smooth as possible. Don't worry about edges. We can mask that. Something like that. Speaking of mask, let's do that real quick. So we create a mask on that layer, switch to black, 100% flow and opacity, and then we just quickly mask out the overspill. Not a whole lot there, but nonetheless, let's be thorough. 70%, 50, 75. We'll leave it at 75 for now. That looks pretty good. Let's see what we did there. See that? The knee was dark and strong, and now it's a little more fluid. Fantastic. Not only is it smoother looking, but it's also essentially a reduction of contrast, which is what I want because I always add contrast when I add color. How about another layer? Some discoloration going on in this hip, which I can address with a little bit of, probably this will work. Let's find out. Just like this, constantly resampling, bring some of that darker color out. Already that helps a lot, yeah. That helps a lot. I'm gonna leave that layer alone because I may change the opacity on it, I may not. I want that's like a significant fix, just like right next to it, that hand. Before we continue on the rest of the body, let's see what we can do with that hand. Okay. So again, back to a 4% flow on a new layer. Let's see what we can do with the arm, building it up forward. Trying to keep this shape fluid as possible. Yeah. There's of course the blue cast as well on her hand, but the fix that we will eventually set up for the leg will help us there too. So we're not going to worry about it too much, even if we paint over a little bit. Painting over perimeters, over the ring, over the edge of the fingers even. Doesn't matter. We're just trying to smooth things out. And here again, like I said, this might be just the next step in working the hand. We might do more. I don't know yet. For now, it is a lot smoother. Bring some darker color into it. There we go. That isn't bad. I need a highlight color. I'm going to choose one from the stomach. Just something to help shape a little bit differently. Yeah. Okay. A mask on that one. Once again, black 100% everything, flow and opacity. And let's clean up our perimeter and our ring. There we go. And like I said before, if this seems, you know, like, do I really want to do this? Is it really necessary to mask like this? I think it is. I strongly recommend it actually, because I want you to be able to use those paint strokes when you're painting in these areas, which is, make no mistake, you're digital painting. You're trying to rebuild highlights and shadows and things like that on a body part. When you don't want those paint strokes to try to stop at an edge, they're going to look fake and it's going to be uncomfortable. So paint over and then mask. All right, so let's see how strong that is. It's really strong, and that's all right because we can change things if we need to. I'm going to clean this up a bit some more. Cool. Let's just put it at 75% or 70 and look at what it looks like. Okay, that's a little bit better. It's a little bit better. We can actually go in, now that it's so subtle, the remaining problems are so subtle, after we do all our frequency separation, we can explore if even further dodge and burn or some healing might work to get rid of the problem areas that persist. The key is to let it build up and solve the problem, you know, in a smart way, because if you try to attack it all out, I see veins and tendons, heal it. That won't work, guaranteed. It's a build-up process to get the look that you want. All right, so for now, another layer. In between high and low, so we can paint certain transitions. A little bit of smoothness I'd like to see here, so back to 4%, just to smooth out the stomach just a little bit here. There's some tones in there that I, you know, a little bit of marbling is what I call it, so we want to smooth that out just a little. Yeah, that feels pretty good. Gonna mask that out. Now in some edits, you know, especially with swimwear, I might paint every single piece of skin completely, and in one of the tutorials on here I do that, and that's just a look, and it's designed to look a little hyper real, not quite 100% real. This it's gonna look hyper real, but I definitely want to preserve some reality if I can. So I really only want to address certain areas. So we're back to a new layer. Before we address the armpit, let's see what we can just smooth out this top of the shoulder just a little bit. Even the highlight, make it a little bit smoother into the areas around it. Once again, complete disregard for, you know, the bikini strap or the necklace or the hair. We're just trying to get our shapes painted in so we can, you know, make everything a little smoother looking. Make those transitions nice and even. How's that? Don't forget the highlights. Don't want to paint over highlights. You'll lose that dynamic. We want that highlight on that shoulder. Very important. Okay, now. I did a lot on the chest and the shoulder there, but I figured that's a point of focus as well. I think a secondary point of focus. So let's mask that, clean it up a bit. Smaller brush here for these straps. Something like this. Hair, etc. I'm going to address the neck by itself, so I'm just going to mask that out. That necklace is so thin, as soon as I change the opacity, the necklace will look fine, almost certainly. So I'm not going to fight that. I'm just going to do like maybe a 65%. That's another thing too, the opacity that you use on every one of these layers, depending on what kind of area you're working on and what kind of look you want. Sometimes just a significantly less opacity could bring back reality, but still give a small element of smoothing out and polish, right? So sometimes it could be 40 or 50%, but it looks exactly what you want. Now the neck and face, and then we'll address the armpit. Because that could be a multi-step process. I don't know. We're gonna find out. Oops, let's get a little darker color there, blend that upward. Good. Yeah. How well did that work? Wow, I like that. Not a whole lot here, not a whole lot of face to see, and it's a very simple motion, and there's not too many problems on her, just blending out a few things. And just to do a quick wash in the lip to smooth that out just a little, and I think that'll be good, and some simple masking to knock that one out. Like I said earlier when I was talking about the raw, Shelby really wanted this hat, and we've been talking about using the hat with some kind of swimwear by the pool for a while. So when she presented the hat to me, as a photographer, I just thought, well, I'm gonna have shadow on the face, now what? So I had to be concerned about how I posed her or guided her during her own posing, but the soft light definitely helped. All the white patio reflecting up also helped, and making sure her head angle is the right way. Hats are cool, but sometimes a model, a collaborator, or an art director, a client has an idea. Oh, I love this big floppy hat on the beach. And if you tell a glamour photographer, big floppy hat on the beach, we immediately panic a little inside because you're literally just adding shade on top of my subject. Now what? And there are ways and creative ways to use a big floppy hat or even a small one, but you got to consider that. Don't just put the hat on and shoot like normal, because your face isn't going to be lit. It's not going to look right. There's so many different ways you can go about it, but I just want to mention that because a hat outdoor in the sun can absolutely make or break you depending on what your plan is. In this case, laying back in a nice diffused environment helped. So let's finish the neck area before we go into that armpit. Once again, resampling color as I go to rebuild a lot of that. Pretty good. And now we mask as needed. And we'll just leave it at 70% for now. It's just a little something to soften that up. Okay, so new layer. Let's see what's going to happen with the armpit. A lot of discoloration going on in there. So I have to see what's kind of best color. This dark area in the arm. We're going to start with that and bring it up. Resample, smooth out. Something like that. Maybe this color here. Oh, that teal that's in there. I think a lot of that teal must have just been caught from the reflection because it's so light or something. It could just be the way the raw processing went down, depending on the color, skin compensation that I was doing with the skin tone tool. There's so many reasons why that could have gone that direction. But I'm going to paint it pretty heavily, and then we can mask out to bring back the elements that we don't want to have that strong painted look. Mask, straight black 100%. Let's fix the strap immediately first, and that perimeter. Now let's see, that's all of it. So we want to keep, well, I don't know, maybe opacity will just do it. Let's look. We got to look at it for the whole thing. No one's going to be looking at your image like that necessarily. You want to see what they experience here. That is better, but I'm going to bring back some of the reality, maybe to a 70%, because the little tinge of blue on it, I just want to make sure that my painting looks good. The tinge of blue can be fixed because we're about to create a fix for the major blue. Okay, yeah. Now we just have a left leg to contend with, and I think we'll be good. It's basically solid, so it shouldn't need too much. Down here we had the stretch mark area, so we're going to try to blend some of that. Constantly resampling. I just want to remind you, don't just choose one color and go for it. Photoshop doesn't think, oh, that's skin tone. It just thinks that's a literal color. You got to blend the color when you use this method, and I really recommend you use this method if you want that glamour look. I'm going to fade this out quite a bit with opacity. I just want to get a lot of color in there so I can start the process. In other words, feel it out and see is that enough? Is that not enough? Okay, Something like that. Let's do a quick mask and then we'll start playing with opacity. You notice how I handled the upper part of the thigh independent because it's folded up against the lower part of the thigh. I want to be able to get that perimeter dark and hard if I needed it. You know, that deep shadow in there. I don't want to paint over it because I might lose the contrast from the dark areas if I don't account for that. So clean up that part of the thigh, clean up this part of the leg. We'll start with a 70%. I'm going to look back here. Maybe, no, that looks really great. A couple other smooth spots and we're done. Love how this one's coming together. Something like that, right there and there. This little shadowy area on the knee, very important. We don't want to lighten that too much because that's the shape of her knee. Once again, anatomy. But just smoothing out some areas here and there. The dark area there I probably could have dodged and burned, and that's okay. Just now noticing it, so clearly it's not that big a deal. And just blending that dark area into the lighter part of the skin. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. I think that'll work. Excellent. Get a mask out just to be sure. I want to make sure I'm not spilling over into any areas because that could be enhanced later on with what we're going to do. We don't want that. Yep, that works pretty good. Make it like a 75 as well. How do I feel about it? All right, that's feeling pretty good. So as we move forward from here, we have to consider the hand still has some weird textures from the dodging and burning and the painting that we just did. We might want to address that again. We'll have to see. And of course, we do have that huge cast of color on the leg that needs to be addressed. And that's going to be in our secondary color correction. For now, though, the takeaways from this frequency separation process is that we were doing both fixes and artistic decisions on how we want the smoothness of the skin to appear. And, you know, two birds with one stone, as it were. You want to make sure that you're using frequency separation the best way possible. And just as one final reminder on it, if you do proper healing and dodge and burn before it, your frequency separation works better. So let's continue on and see how we're going to fix these other issues. All right, so with frequency separation done, if you watched the previous videos on this, you know that I still have to address a very significant color cast on her leg from the pool. And that's fine, we're gonna get there, but I gotta get all the dynamics and shapes in order. In other words, liquify. So let's go ahead and liquify. We gotta go back here to the very top layer, and we need a new raster layer, a new merge layer. So Shift, Option, Command, E, and that'll pop that on top. So I know that the fix I have to do across the leg is significant, but I need to, if I'm gonna change the shape, I have to do that first. So I don't have an adjustment layer on top that then doesn't match, you know, a change of shape. So let's go ahead and Shift Command X or go to the filter menu for Liquify. Now I don't need a whole lot here. And normally I don't, you know, luckily with a lot of the models that I shoot, it's not an issue of fixing problems, it's just stylizing most of the time. And in this case, for example, here, where she's sitting on the patio, there's probably a little bit of dynamics and geometry that I'm gonna change there because it's kind of flattening her a bit. So we have to consider the patio stone. It's very geometric, it's very strong and linear. So we have to slide our changes just to smooth out her butt a little bit along the same, you know, line of the actual stone of the patio tile, because if we start pulling up and down, we start changing the shape. We don't want that, right? We can probably get away with it down here a little bit as I keep the geometry nice and smooth. We can get away with bending that because we don't see the edge of the tile. That works pretty well. Remember, rib cages, like I say in every single one of these edits, you have to consider a model's rib cage. Very, very important and seems simple enough, but when you're adjusting waist, making it more tapered or trying to compensate for a pose, just to keep that hourglass figure, just remember rib cages. Because even if you don't know what's wrong with an image, when the ribs are completely, you know, squashed, it tells your viewer something's not right here, and you're not sure what it is. And that's because we see each other in real life all the time. We know when something's wrong, even if we can't put our finger on it. Little minor changes. Now let's go over here to her face and hair. Zoom out just a bit. There we go. Just gonna smooth out the jawline a little bit, just the way the angle hit there. Again, for me, it's not about changing shape. It's about take the existing curves and geometry and arts and all this stuff and making it just a little smoother, a little more stylized. Maybe a little bit of hair life, just a bit. Taper the hat a little bit. Why not? That feels kind of cool. Make that stand out a little more. I sometimes do that to wardrobe. Just change the shape to make it pop a little more, make it a little stronger somehow. Everything else looks good there. Let's take a look at the whole image. As my eye moves around the image, does anything strike me? All right, so this is just gonna be a stylistic decision, but on her left shoulder, that's absolutely her anatomy, that's her bones for sure. But I wanna see a little more roundness. I don't wanna see just that square shape. That makes me feel a little bit better about all the curves that we have. In general, yes, I am feeling that. I'm gonna change one thing on the leg because I feel, like I said, her leg going into the water like this, her right leg is so strong. It kind of dominates the image, going down into the tendon and her thigh muscle in the water, the foot in the water, the way it's hitting. That's a really strong part of the image. So I wanna make sure that that has a nice fluid shape. Real subtle changes. Yeah, I think that works pretty well. Now keep in mind, when you are liquifying, this is just as good a time as any to bring it up. A lot of people will see Liquify, even if they don't know the tool's name, again, non-photographers, they see it as like one of the controversial elements of Photoshop because people misuse it. You don't want to, stretch and squish and get silly with it necessarily, but you can use it for stylizing, not to make, bigger waist smaller or bigger muscles bigger or bigger boobs bigger. Don't just look at it that way. It doesn't have to be this corruption that people see it as. It can absolutely be a way to perfect. Just like we cleaned up all the little leaves and everything on this shot, it's a way to just kind of add a little extra refinement to the shot without completely changing your subject. So that was some good Liquify. Let's keep going. Now with Liquify done, and I've changed the shapes around the image that I felt were necessary to change, then I can move on into some secondary correction. Now on this shot, unlike some of the other ones in the tutorial, the secondary correction is going to require a significant fix. If you watch the other videos of this particular set, we have absolutely been talking about it the whole time, and that's the blue cast on the leg. So let's go ahead and figure out how we're going to do that.